let's get started. And I would like to start by welcoming everyone here. And I'm very excited about today. It's a very exciting topic for me personally, and I hope it's exciting for you too. But let's first get started by welcoming everyone. And we'd like to do that by welcoming those attending from the Institute of the Middle East and Egypt. Hey!
Welcome.
Okay. And the Institute of Brazil.
Brazil,
Those here
welcome.
from Brazil.
Yes.
Okay. And North Africa. South Africa here.
Of Neuro-Semantics Africa. Oh, okay.
Yes.
Hi. Hi.
Hi, everybody.
Hi. Okay. And the Philippines.
Hello, Philippines.
And the US. Australia.
Australia. Yay, Danda.
Okay. And Europe.
Hello.
A few people from Europe today. Okay. And Malaysia.
Yes.
Hello.
Malaysia.
Hello, everyone.
Scandinavians. Henrik.
Yeah!
And Hong Kong and China. Okay, and Indonesia.
Hey,
Malam.
And Latin America. We have
Yeah.
also people from Latin America.
Hello.
Okay, so thank you everyone for joining today. And as I said, today would be a very interesting topic for many, many reasons. And I'll let you discover why. But I'd like to say that writing today, what we'll be covering is something fascinating, something that is not about putting ideas on paper. It's about many facets. It's about different ways to discover new things about yourself, your power, and how to express yourselves. So with that quick intro, I would like to give the floor to Michael and to start our presentation. Please help me welcome Michael. Hey!
Well, when it comes to writing, there's a simplicity of it and a mystery of it. The simplicity of it is you take a thought and you just write it down. The mystery of it and the complexity of it is that after you write down your idea, you have to develop it. Say you have the idea that power is responsibility. So you write down power is responsibility. And then you sit there, probably, if you're like a lot of people, wondering, what do I write now? And so the problem of the blank page of that. So when it comes to writing, several facets. We don't write writing. We write an induction to an experience. So if you get that straight right from the beginning, that'll help out with writing. We don't write writing, and writing really is not about grammar or spelling. It's about inducing a reader into a state or an experience that you find exciting, important, relevant, and you want to share that experience with someone. And so you write an induction. Well, it's kind of like a hypnotic induction, but it involves a lot more than just that, because you're writing to help a person have an experience. And here's the problem with reading. You can read and not have an experience. You can read and you can not have the experience that the writer wanted you to have. So that's now we find the art of writing. How do you write so that the idea, the state, the experience that is so important for you can be conveyed through all the symbols and the writing and the words and the paragraphs, so that somebody else can share that experience. So that begins the mystery of writing. It is the simplest thing in the world. It is one of the most complex things in the world. when you start with writing, writing affects so many different aspects of us. And I wrote down a list of the things that writing deals with. First of all, when you're writing, you can't write any better than you think. So if you ever read some poorly written things, it comes from someone doing some poor thinking. And so you can't write better than you think. And as you write, you're conceptualizing and understanding and experience a world, and you're conceptualizing that world in pictures in your mind, words in your mind, sounds in your mind, and then kinesthetic sensations, and you're trying to convey that on paper. So as you write, you cannot help but frame. So what framing have you created in your writing already? And what framing do you need so that it can be framed in such a way that it does evoke that experience? As you're framing, you're organizing things. And so every writing is organized. We begin with a simple sentence, and we're stating that there's some object, it's having some experience, and it's leading to some effect. Now in grammar, you call that a noun, a verb, and an object. But it's so much more. You're starting with an object, an experience, and then how does it work out? What's the progress of it? And the verb. Then there's the paragraph. And the paragraph should be a cohesive thought that is conveyed by 2, 3, maybe 5 sentences, maybe a few more. If you've ever read some people in their emails or in their writing, it's like one paragraph and it never ends. It's just one solid piece of sentence after sentence after sentence, and it's not divided so that it's organized so that you can see the development of this thought as it grows and evolves and transforms into the next thought and then into the next, so that the writer takes you on an experience throughout those paragraphs. So writing involves that. Writing involves perspective. So whenever you write, you're writing from some perspective, could be yours, could be first person perspective. It could be as if you were experiencing something that somebody else experienced, or stepping outside the system and watching it, third person perception. And so perception is built into whatever you write. You're writing from some perception, whether you know it or not. Writing involves your voice, whether you're the all-knowing author of the writing, or whether you have a voice of questioning or of commitment or wonder or curiosity. And so there's always a voice. So many things involved in writing. And when we write, we're obviously coming from an intention. So what is your intention in writing? And there can be some really bad intentions. One bad intention is trying to impress people. Because if you're trying to impress people, your languaging and the writing that you do will be forced, and it'll sound contrived instead of speaking from yourself and from the way you normally talk. One of the statements that's in most books on writing is have the writing so that it sounds like how you talk. So the voice and the intention of writing. Writing does so many things. So I want to make a list of some of the things that writing will do for you. First, so number one, writing enriches and expands learning. One way to test to see if you've learned something is to see if you can write about it. And then a day or two later, read what you wrote and see if it makes any sense. And you'll find out it's a good test of learning. And oftentimes when you write, I know this is why I write to learn. I'm amazed at how many times I'm in the process of writing whether it's by hand or on the computer, and I'll write something, and I'll step back and think, that's not too bad. Why didn't I think of that? So writing expands and enriches learning. And when you go back to reflect upon what you've written and you start expanding it and elaborating upon it, your learning can be elaborated. And oftentimes you can find out that you know things that maybe you didn't know that you knew. So writing expands learning, and it deepens thinking. And once again, you can't write better than you think. So it forces you to really think about what you're writing and how you're writing it. Oftentimes I'll write, and as I use a word, I'm thinking, what does that word actually mean? It forces me to the dictionary to find out where'd that word come from and what are the different uses of that word. And so it's like the clarity check when you're doing meta coaching. Well, what word is that, and what does it really mean? So it deepens your thinking. You'll learn how to frame from writing, because if you, you are framing, and so when you read your own writing a day or two later, when it gets cold, you'll find out oftentimes that the framing that you did actually undermines the very purpose of your writing. The experience that you were inducing, the thoughts that you were conveying are undermined by the framing. And so when you go back to look at how did I frame that and how do I need to frame it? So, and if there's questions about these things, we can talk about those in a little bit. Writing will really create precision for you. It's said that a person, that reading causes a person to be full. Speaking enables a person to be ready, and writing enables a person to be precise. And so writing with precision, and a little bit later we talk about writing and drafts. Everything I write, or almost every single thing I write, it's after 2 or 3 drafts. Because one of the problems of writing is nobody, and I mean nobody, writes it right the first time. And several famous authors have made statements like, there is no good writing, there's only good rewriting and rewriting and rewriting. And so getting into the habit of constantly going back and expanding it, making it richer, cleaning it up is something really important for you as a writer. Obviously, writing will enhance your ability to influence people. So you write your thought, you write your experience, you write a paragraph or two, you go back and you look at it, and what you're doing is a form of influencing people. What words, what phrases, what expressions will enable a person to have this or that experience? And so it is the structure of influencing as you're inducing those states. Writing will enable you to enhance the quality of your life. So as you can't write any better than you think, you can't write really any better and induce the different kinds of states than the quality of your life and the quality of your state. So the quality of your life and the quality of your states will, to a great extent, influence, maybe even control the quality of your writing. And so I recommend a daily habit of writing thoughts and insights and experiences, so you come to know yourself more intimately and more deeply. Writing is a great memory tool. If you ever have a great idea, had a great insight, and you wanted to speak to people in such a way that you influence them, win their minds and their hearts, and then later you forget, no, what was it that I said? Or what was it that I thought that I could say? If you've written it down, you got a memory tool. So writing is a great way to keep in mind the things that you have thought, and so as a memory tool. Enables you to work out an idea. So part of the thinking aspect of writing is that you can work out your idea by writing it down, and then as you come back to it, as you share it with somebody else, and they give you feedback, the idea can be worked out more thoroughly and more completely. I find that with the chapters I write or the articles I write. I'll start to write something, and I think I've got one article to write about this. And by the time I finish it, I go, I think there's something else to be said, but I don't know exactly what it is to say yet. So I let it simmer. I think about it. As thoughts arise, I'll write those down, and then I'll come to revisit it. And what it does, it enables a person to work out an idea more thoroughly. Writing enables you to expand your voice so that over a period of time, as you write many things, from emails to letters to press releases to exploring an idea, you'll have a lot of different voices arising, so that just like you can speak in so many different ways and induce different states, you'll have different ways of conveying something. You can do it in a humorous way, in a comic way. You can do it as a biography, as a storytelling, lots of different ways of finding that voice and using it. So lots of purposes for writing. And so getting into the habit of writing is just a great way to start expanding your thinking, your feeling, your experiencing, the quality of your life. When it comes to writing something serious like an article or a book, I go through 7 stages. And the first stage is the idea generation stage. So if you're going to write, make sure you have a good idea to work with. The quality of that idea is going to be the quality of your writing. So starting with getting an idea. And how do you get an idea? Well, the best way is to read constantly, to read expansively, to read widely, to constantly be reading and talking about it and conversing about it, and that'll be a way to start the whole process, getting that idea. Get one idea. So one of the problems with some writers is, just like some speakers, when they start speaking, they've got 2 or 3 ideas, and they haven't sorted out what is the idea that I want to convey. I tell a lot of people that when I start to write a book, I always write the back cover first. So I take 3 paragraphs to write, here's the idea that I want to develop in this book. But I write it as if I've already done it. In this book, this is what you're going to find. So I write the back page first. That gives me a very large map of what to do and where to go with it. Then I sit down to write a set of chapters. So how am I going to divide that idea into 5 chapters, 10 chapters, 20? So I write out the chapters. Once I write the chapters, then I write the preface. So I haven't even written the book, but I'm writing a preface to the book. All of this is preparing because I've got an idea. I don't know how to say it yet, but I'm playing back and forth with using these processes to do that. The second stage of writing, after you get your idea, is the framing. You're thinking about how you're going to say it. And so now you sit down to think up, and this is where having an outline is so important. Even if you're just writing five paragraphs for an article, having some kind of outline or structure or organization so you know where you start, where you go, and where you're going to end up at. So outlining it really helps to prevent writer's block and other kinds of blockages later on. So the framing of it. And I usually will do that with a blank page several times. So I've got my idea, and so I'll write a series of chapters when I'm sitting in a coffee shop or on a plane. I'll write it, and then later on I'll get a blank sheet of paper, and without looking at what I had done before, I'll do it all over again freshly. And I'll do that 2 or 3 times, because what I'm doing is trying to figure out how to divide the idea so that I can take a person on a mental journey through the process. So the framing part. Once you frame it out and you got a pretty good idea of what you want to accomplish, then comes stage 3, which is researching. So who else has written on the subject? What have they written? Who are the key thinkers in the field? How do they approach it? And so this is where checking out the territory, because whatever idea you had, you're not the first person to have that idea. Many other people have approached it before. And so you start out with that idea, and now you find out who's writing about it. This kind of research in any kind of master's degree or doctorate degree would be called review of literature. So go find out who's the key thinkers in the field on whatever you're researching. And if there's not a lot of things that have been written about it, then go interview people who you consider the best people, the best practices, the experts in that field. Go interview them, find out what they know. And that'll be part of the research. And if the research is about experience, finding people who have had that experience, who seem to be the most successful with that experience. And so that'd be the research period. So first the idea, then the framing, then the researching. And then stage 4 is freestyle writing. Whatever, just sit down, start writing. And don't worry about mistakes. In fact, aim to make mistakes. Don't correct spelling. At this point, just download what's in everything you know. So I do that now regularly with everything I write. I recently, the last book I wrote was Metatherapy. And so I sat down and for 3 days, just wrote down everything I knew. So that's that downloading, that freestyle writing, and just letting it flow and refusing to allow the slightest hint of judgment. Just write it down. You'll cross out most of it later. I did, but you'll start there with that freestyle. This is a neuro-muscular activity of with your hand writing something down from the thought in your head. So it's neuromuscular to go from thought to paper. And if you can't get past that, if you can't get past that, then you're not going to be able to write. It's just going to be all wandering around inside the head. And so what stops most people is they want to write it right. They want to write it flawlessly. They want to write it perfectly. They want it to be the finished product. And if that is such an unrealistic expectation for anybody, you'll just disappoint yourself. And so aim to write it wrong if you need to set that as your intention, but just write it so that it gets out. Freestyle writing. When we do the training on on writing. It's one of the exercises we do to do freestyle writing. And so you get a piece of paper and you get your pen and you start writing. And if the first thought is, I don't know what to write, write that. I don't know what to write. I am sitting here with my pen, moving it across this piece of paper, and I don't know what my next thought is going to be. It could be, what is going to be for lunch? I don't know what is going to be for, but you just start writing. And you create this practice of thinking to paper so that you can start later on, think on paper. And so it's, once you get that freestyle writing, now you can start the next stage, which is revision. So you clean up the mess. So you get things down on paper. When I do that on the typewriter, on the computer, and I come across a place where there's something else here, but it's missing, I don't know what it is, I just put 2 asterisks. And then I continue. And the 2 asterisks and sometimes I'll write, pick up the book by Jim Collins on Good to Great. Or I'll pick up the book on NOP Volume 1. Look for presuppositions. I'll write myself some little note, and then I just keep going. Because when you're first writing, if you're always stopping, then you're always stopping, and it's so easy to get stopped. The best thing, keep going. And so if you come across something, I know there's that story that I want to tell right here. And so just I put 2 asterisks, I put story. And if I have some little idea about what the story was about, the Red Barn. And then I keep going. Later, when I start the revising, that's where I go. I'll go see if I can fill in all of these blank spots. So in revising, you're going back and you're cycling through it again, and you're now doing a little bit of evaluation, and you're revising. I revise books 7 times, sometimes more, hardly ever less, 7 times. So the first 2-3 times of revision, on revision 1, 2, and 3, I'm filling in, I'm writing it more thoroughly, adding all kinds of things. By the 4th revision, now I'm looking for structure and for what fits and what doesn't fit, and now I'm crossing out. And oftentimes I'm trying to make it as succinct as possible, as brief as possible. So I'm crossing out sometimes as many as 1/4 of the words, and sometimes throwing out many, many paragraphs. Because the revision now is to make it all consistent, coherent, so that it flows, and it's getting tighter. The 5th one, I'm looking for consistency of the theme, that the theme has consistently been developed. And sometimes I'll find, here's 3, 4, 5 paragraphs I wrote. It's a little section inside of a chapter, and it's good stuff, but it's irrelevant. It doesn't really fit here. So I'll cut it all out, put it into a little file, name it, and so revise. The 5th revision that I do is revising to the relevancy of the theme. The 6th one, I'm doing it much tighter. The 6th and the 7th one, I'm going in, looking a little bit, as much as I can, for grammatical errors, typographical errors, and tightening it up. While I'm reading through this, I'm oftentimes having other people read through it. By the 5th and 6th drafts, Geraldine starts reading about the 3rd draft and reading through it, and she oftentimes helps me to recognize, because she'll say, how does this fit? And I always encourage her to write that when she's reading through it. Write that down. How does this fit? And then when I go through, I go, yeah, it doesn't fit. That stuff goes out. So that's the revision. Step 6 is proofreading. And the worst person to proofread is you. Unless you're just really skilled in that, you can't see it. You know what you wrote, and you'll read it, and you'll be reading for meaning, not for the correction of it, and seeing the actual letters. And so it's always good to have someone else do the proofreading and correcting for the content, the appearance, what fits, what's been repeated. So the proofreading. The 7th one is now publishing. So once you have your manuscript and it's pretty ready to go, you may want to find a publisher who will publish it. And publishers always have on their websites instructions about how to submit a manuscript. All the big publishers use literary agents, so you can't do it yourself directly. You have to hire a literary agent. You have to have a contract with them. There's books on literary agents and how to reach them and their contact information and the kind of books that they sell to publishers. Then of course, there's all kinds of other kind of publishing. You can publish it yourself. You can create it as a PDF file. You can provide it in many other different ways as you now are getting ready to do the publishing of it. And there's a whole science behind that. We can talk about that when we get to the question. So those are the 7 stages of writing that I go through. And to reorganize that information in a little different way, if you think about writing as a game, and we have 4 quarters to the game, the first quarter is the pre-writing stage, and that's when you get your idea, your framing, and your researching. That's the pre-writing. You're writing, but it's not the getting down on paper so much as it is getting the idea, the framing, and the researching. Quarter 2 is the free writing, and this is where you're going to be putting down everything that you can and starting the revisions. So quarter 2 is the writing and the rewriting stage. Quarter 3 is when you do the refinement. This is the proofreading and the presentation. And then the last one would be the selling stage. Searching for a publisher, perhaps, or negotiating for someone to publish it for you, or working with someone so that you do self-publishing. So that's a lot. Let me stop, and I think it'd be best if we take questions.
Yes, yes, that's really a lot. So those who'd like to send questions, please frame them by writing the word question before them or the letter Q. And Michael, one of the things you mentioned at the beginning today is that you said writing is about inducing experience. So this is actually a very interesting thought, because I thought before that writing is about sharing information, sharing knowledge, but now what you're saying is actually much more than that. So thinking about it as a coach or a trainer, we do have an easier way to get feedback when we are inducing a state in the training room or through the coaching session. We can get feedback. How can we get or know that what we're doing is inducing what we intend when it's more like a one-way communication?
Yeah. Well, this is where whatever the idea is that you're presenting and you're writing, and as you frame it, you do your research, test it out with people. Constantly test it out in conversation. If you're a trainer or presenter, then present your ideas to see how a group of people would respond to it, what makes sense to them, what does not make sense. So we need that feedback, and the earlier you get it, if you get it continuously throughout the process, that's the best. So you might want to have some thinking buddies, not writing buddies so much as thinking. Get some people who will play with you when you present something, and set up situations where, let me present this to you. Does this make sense? Do you have any ideas of how else, a better way that I could present this?
Okay, so yeah,
Uh,
one of the
one more-
things I noticed. Go ahead.
One more thought is that if writing is about inducing an experience or state, what is the state? So if you're writing non-fictional things, non-fictional books and articles, then one of the state is learning. So you want to induce a learning state, which means you want to induce curiosity, engagement, wonder, maybe confusion, so that people will want to get clear as you present a confusion and invite them into their learning. So the learning state, but what other state? To what extent do you want to induce a state of having fun while they're learning, or humorous while they're learning? Or if you're writing something that's going to take them inside into the inner space and into meta space, so inducing a state of self-discovery. So knowing the state that you're going after, the experience you're going after. When I wrote the book on resilience, one of the things I was aware of is I want people to experience resilience as they read the book. I don't want them to read and understand about resilience only. I want them at times to experience it from the inside. So the little stories in there are designed for that purpose.
Okay. Another interesting thought that just came to me, that we as coaches and trainers, we do have a lot of the skills that can be used in writing. And actually that will give us an edge over someone who does not know what we have and what we're doing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. So one of the questions, actually you have a lot of questions since you started taking questions. One of the question here is, do you see a difference in the quality of your writing when you're using a paper and a pen versus typing on a computer?
It is different. And I like the difference. So when I go to the coffee shop, I never take my laptop. I'm using paper and pen. Writing by hand, for me, it helps me to work out the idea, because I can now do diagrams and sketches, and with non-fictional materials, you need diagrams in your mind, and probably to present to people so they can see the concept that you're working with. So I like the that. So I write out in full hand at the coffee shop, and then I come back and I type it in, and that gives me at least two exposures to that same material.
So basically what you're saying is, by using a paper and a pen, it helps you to work out the idea, it helps you to put the idea out and massage it and play with it.
Yeah.
Okay. That's really useful, because I would say that most people would prefer one way or the other, but you're saying that both ways are useful.
Yeah.
Okay. So another question before, actually we have two questions, then we can move on. So another question here is, when you wrote the meta therapy, can you give an example of the idea generation phase? Person asking, Amin is trying to get an idea about how you've done that. So the idea generation for the meta therapy book, how did you do that?
So with meta therapy, one of the things I wanted to write was something that would add something new and different to the subject of therapy. And there's thousands of books on therapy. I have hundreds of books on therapy in my personal library. So the first question I have in working out the idea, what can I say that's new or different? And so the idea of meta therapy came, and now there are dozens of books on the meta nature of therapy, but none of the books use the structural things that we have in the neurosemantics. And so I came across a quotation, and the quotation from Gregory Bateson was that in therapy, what has changed are the meta-communicative habits of the person. And taking that one paragraph, I sat down with that paragraph, I wrote it out. An interesting thing about writing is if you copy the writing of somebody else, especially a great thinker like Gregory Bateson, you begin to think the way they think. It's a great practice. I've done that with Maslow. I've done that with Bateson. I've done that with Korzybski. You can read their paragraph. You could photograph it and put it into your computer. But if you write it out, because writing is slows things down, because you can only write at a certain speed. I can't write as fast as I can type. I can type 3 times faster than I can write. But as I write it, in a way, you're entering into that person's way of thinking. And that's what I did with that particular quotation about the meta-communicative habits, and that somehow in therapy, those habits and the rules behind those habits change. That's what Bateson wrote. And so I started diagramming meta-communication. So I'm not just communicating to myself or someone else. I'm aware of my communication to myself or to someone else. It's meta-communication, and it's a habit. And behind that, so above that, I put habits. So habitual, routinized, programmed ways of thinking that just is operating automatically, and I'm not even aware of it. So therapy is awareness of the habits, the programs of the meta communication. And in writing that, that's what got me excited about the meta therapy book, because of all the books I've read on therapy and meta therapy, none explicate that. And so that was the new idea. So now the question is there enough in that idea to write a whole book on? And so then I started writing out, what are the pieces of that? How many, what facets of that? And one of the first things I wrote was, well, number one, this is a meta place. And that's where the idea of meta place came. And in this meta place, there's several levels. And if therapy is dealing with that, then that's where we go. And you have to know where you're going first. So chapter 1 is meta place. And then from there, what is the healing? So then I just took the word healing. What is, if something inside that meta place needs to be healed, what's wounded? What's hurting? And of course, it's the erroneous maps that do not allow us to navigate in real life in the outer, the external world. So that's where the idea came from and how it started.
Thank you, Michael, for that. So we do have a lot of questions, but let's take one more before we move forward. And this is actually an interesting question about writer's block. How do you to know your way handling writer's block?
Okay. Well, of course, once again, going back to what you just mentioned about what we have as meta coaches and trainers, the genius state is the state that will prevent writer's block. I had writer's block up until 1994, and that's when I ran the personal genius pattern with myself. And that was the last year I had writer's block. Up till then, there was many days of suffering in front of a blank screen or a blank sheet of paper, and I knew I had an idea, but I was blocked, stuck, and so literally the genius state is the state where you protect that state. You step out, you step in, you step out, and if you do that cleanly, then you can really protect that state. Now, there's lots of other little hints and tools about writer's block. Probably the most important one is don't try to write it flawlessly. Don't try to write it right. Embrace the imperfection of whatever you write. Whatever you write is going to be quite fallible and imperfect, especially at first. And if you're in a judgment state, if you're judging it and criticizing it and critiquing it, when you just gave it birth, you're going to kill it. So probably that's the most important thing about how most people suffer writer's block. They're trying to create and judge at the same time. And we need to create and later on judge, evaluate, but keep those really separate.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that, Michael. We do have more questions, but I would say let's move forward and then we can have them later.
Well, I really don't have anything else to present.
So I have more for you.
Okay.
So one of the things you said that writing and helping others, it's actually useful for us as writers to experience things and to learn and to have more clarity. Can you elaborate more about the benefits, personal benefits that someone can go through by writing?
So obviously you're developing your own thoughts, your own creativity, your own ability to express and articulate what you're thinking. So it's really an integrative process. To write is to integrate those different skills and capacities so that they work together and they're unified. And so that's going to affect you yourself, that as you think, now you can translate that down. So it's really a mind to muscle process. And if you get used to doing that, and that's where writing regularly is just such an important part of that. It's going to really help you develop your thought, capture your thought, keep that thought so that it develops. I write 30 minutes every day, regardless, whether I'm flying somewhere or doing a training. I always write 30 minutes every single day, and that just keeps the habit fresh and active. Whereas some people, they do it for a while and then they stop for a long while and then they start up again, and that just makes it 10 times harder. It's like going to the gym for a couple days, skipping a week, and then doing another day or two. It's just the hard way of doing it.
I would say what you just said is a key for writing. And personally and other people, we notice that the quality of our writing improves when we do that regularly. Yet it's a challenge. So what's your strategy for writing every day? And I know that sometimes, and I've personally seen it, you have very, very busy days. So how do you still able to write like 30 days a day?
Well, it would be the same question of how do you eat every single day? I mean, does anybody have trouble making time to eat? Once you set it as just, this is what I do. I write 30 minutes every day, or 10 minutes. To start with 10 minutes. You don't have to do 30. But once you set that, it's like brushing your teeth. You know, it doesn't take all that long, but once you set the habit and get into the habit, then it becomes more of just part of your routine. And you can do that with, the other thing I do, everything counts. So when I write an email, I'm writing, and I try to write emails in such a way that it's intentional. And I usually when I write an email, I don't just write it and send it. I write it, read it, adjust, and maybe do that twice before I send it. So email writing is an easy way to write because you know the person you're writing to, and you can see that person, and you get feedback from that person, and so you take what they have written and you respond to whatever parts of it you do, and then if you think in terms of what state do I want to induce, what experience do I want them to have, you're at the very heart of what writing is about.
So does that mean it's useful when writing a book or an article to imagine someone and have a persona for that person while I'm writing for them?
Right. So that is a little secret that most writers do, that when they're writing their book, they have one person in mind that they're writing to, or a couple people that they're writing to, so that it's not an amorphous, unknown audience, but they've got a particular face and person that they're writing to, and that usually helps with the writing to make the writing more personal. The writing will sound like how you talk, rather than being affected and trying to create a kind of a persona.
It's very interesting, and I'm getting a lot of ideas and thoughts from what you're saying. So another question, and that's from your experience, because I know that the first book you wrote, it took you 8 years to write and publish, if I'm correct. From your experience, what is the main reason people are not able to write a book? Because I believe most of us, or this is at least my imagination, most of the coaches and trainers, they have this idea that they want to write a book. Yet again, most of us don't do that. So what's preventing most people from doing that?
Well, probably what we've already talked about. They don't separate creating and judging. They create and judge, and so then they're discounting their writing. They're feeling bad about the writing. They're disappointed because their expectations was to write it perfect the first time. So that's one of the things that really stops people. Persistence is the other one. And that is, I know a lot of people who have started and then they put it on hold, and then they came back a month or two later and looked at it, maybe worked a little bit on it, put it on hold, and this goes on for years. So persistence, a commitment to completing it, whether you ever publish it. And so that may be the other thing. Forget about publishing it, write it for yourself. From the very first, I always, and to this day, I write to learn. So I write it for myself. Because if I'm learning from it, probably somebody else could learn from it. The first book I wrote in the field of NLP was The Spirit of NLP. And it was the training notes that I took when I was with Richard Bandler. I just wrote notes every day. And every single day I went back in, wrote more notes, and the places I missed, I would talk to someone about what I missed, and I'd write something in. And then when I finished it all, I would go back in on a consistent basis and just fill in more and more of the details. And that went on for a couple years. And so it was that consistency, but I wrote it for myself. When you're trying to do something with the writing, it creates a ulterior motive instead of the learning motive and the experiencing motive. And so if you're writing to to develop your own skills, to develop your own understanding, your own learn. If you're writing so that you're getting a lot out of it, you'll be more persistent in continuing it.
Okay, so this is about the intention from writing. And if I would like do a little bit of modeling here, what's your main intention when you're writing books?
To learn and to experience.
So that's the intention for you. Do you have other intentions for other people and others, or it's just mainly that?
No, that's really the intention. So over the years, there's been, I think, 6 books that I have not finished. So I started it. I went so far, and then at some point I realized I've learned what I've learned, and I don't think that this is valuable enough, relevant enough to keep pushing it to a publication. 2 of the books I wrote with some other people. We were doing collaborative processes. The book, The Field of NLP, which we pretty well completed, we just never wrapped it up. I wrote that with 2 other persons. They were so much on and off. Yes, we'll do it. No, we won't do it. And so I finally just set it aside, and one of these days I'll go back to it.
And that actually will lead us to a question very related to that part. What's your strategy when you're co-writing a book with others?
Well, the co-writing is really a different one. You have to decide who's going to be the key writer, who makes the final decisions. So Bob Bodenhammer wanted to write User's Manual of the Brain, which turned out to be volume 1. He wanted to write that, and I did not. Bob kept saying, this is such an important thing to write a book on the NLP practitioner course. And I said, oh, okay. And he said, would you help me do that? So I said, okay, I'll help you do that. So, and part of the reason was because Martin Roberts at Crown House Publications had a manual on NLP practitioner that they sold. And we asked him, how many manuals of NLP practitioner are you selling? And he said, probably we're averaging 6 to 7 a year. Well, selling 6 books a year that means that there's not much of a market for it. And so when he told me that, and Bob wanted to do it, I said, okay, well, I'll help you. So Bob was a writer. And so if you read User's Manual of the Brain, volume 1, if you'll notice the tone and the perspective of that book, that's Bob's perspective. So you really pick up a lot of the spirit of Bob when you read that book, because that's his. Well, we got that done, and it was published. And a couple of years later, the publisher, Martin Roberts, came and said, "Would you do volume 2 on the master practitioner?" And it was just reversed. Bob didn't want to do that, and I did want to do that. So I said, "I'll be the main writer." So the tone of the 2 books are really different. The second volume is really my tone, and so when you write with somebody else, like with volume 1, there were several times I said, Bob, we needed some of this phraseology is just, we can make it better. And he said, but that's how I speak. Okay, you're the main writer. And so there has to be a collaborative spirit and a willingness to have things go in ways that may not be the best that you like. And so always deciding who's going to be the main writer.
Yeah.
And so when I wrote the book on collaboration with Ian McDermott, we had several times where I said, I don't like the way this is phrased. And he said, and we said, okay, so in this one, you get your way. The next one, I get my way. And so that's how we negotiated that. And then when with that particular book, because Crown House hired a woman to edit it, and she edited out everything that she thought was not grammatically correct, but it was, even though it was not grammatically correct, it was inductive. And I put it in there on purpose. And even though but she cleaned it out. And I complained to the high heavens, to the publisher, that's not how I speak. She put in a lot of yes, buts in that book. And I said, I never talk that way. I don't write that way. Because I know the structure of yes, but, and this now nullifies that. And I complained to the high heavens, to the publisher, let's get rid of all those yes, but, because I did not write that. But he said, well, it's going to be published this way or it's not going to be published. So sometimes a person has to compromise, some of those idiosyncratic desires that we have. Did we lose Mohammed?
Okay, maybe Mohammed dropped out. So Michael, let me just take some questions that has been asked here. A question from Jason here. I am wondering, how does Michael think about deadlines in terms of writing?
So I have a deadline, of course, every week when I write Neurons. I have a deadline every week when I write either in the trainers, e-group, framers, or Morpheus on Wednesday. So those deadlines, they're pretty well set, because it's one article every week in those areas. And so setting a deadline, I'm always attempting to work 2 or 3 weeks ahead, so that I'm not caught at the last minute. And that brings up something about writing articles. With articles, I write to the title.
Okay.
So I'm always thinking about titles. And if I get a title, I can write to it. And so I'm always looking for titles to write to, or if I'm writing a series of articles, something like that. And so the title usually is the one idea in that article.
Okay.
Now, other deadlines, I set myself a deadline, but it's not going to be like January 20th. It's going to be like sometime in March or April, I'll complete this book.
Okay.
So I don't set a deadline for that kind of thing, because there's just so many variables, so many things that can come up and intervene. And because of the supply line problem here in the United States, once upon a time, I could send a manuscript to Versa Press, and within 4 weeks, they can have the book delivered to the warehouse. But now, with the supply line, it's 3 months. So I sent them the manuscript in September on metatherapy. We didn't get the book delivered until mid-December. And that's partly because they have fewer people in the factory to produce the book. They have a longer waiting queue for the books to be when the date that they're published. And one time, the book was published and it was sitting there waiting to be put onto the truck, but there was no truck drivers.
Yes.
So with books, I don't use a specific deadline. It's more within a month or two.
So
Tarek,
Michael,
go ahead.
thank you, Marzuki, for stepping in. Thank you. So adding to the question about deadlines, how do you schedule your writing? Do you have so some people block certain period to write the books, some people write every day. What's your strategy when it comes to schedule writing your book?
Well, I'm going to, the biggest schedule is the 7 drafts. So that's the biggest one. And the first draft is the one that takes the longest. It may take a month, it may take 2 or 3 months to get that first draft. Once I have the first draft, then I'm committed to each of the next 6 drafts, and usually it takes 2 weeks to maybe 4 weeks for each draft. And so that will set up pretty much how long it takes.
Mm. And do you recommend like blocking certain period of time to write the book, or writing every day, small periods?
Well, I write at least 30 minutes. Here at home, I'm probably writing 4 to 5 hours a day.
Okay. Okay. So that's useful in terms of giving us an idea, because most of us would think that it will take months or years to write the book. But what you're saying is that's not really necessarily the case. It's the first draft that would take the most of the time, and then it's faster from that. So adding to that,
Right.
What are some of your strategies or tips that help us write a book quicker?
Well, I guess my first impression is I don't even go there to try to make it quicker. I think my focus is more on going through the process, that I trust the process. The process will work. I just need to work the process. So I don't worry about the time. If it takes longer, it takes longer. If it takes shorter, it takes shorter. So I don't even worry about that. I just focus on the process. So first is the idea, then the framing, then the researching, then the first draft, the first 3 drafts, and then after that, it'll go pretty quickly because it's just wrapping it up, cleaning it up, getting it to presentational style.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm hearing is you don't like to have this idea, you don't like to pressure yourself by having this like a goal. The goal is to write the book, not the speed, not the time.
Yeah. So my focus is more on quality rather than the quantity of time.
Yet you do produce, on average, is it 2 or 3 books a year?
Well, during the pandemic, it was 3 or so. But before that, it was, I think I was to a 1.5 to 2 kind of framework. So really half a year to produce something. And that's because whenever I get into something, so like with learning, I went back through every book I got on learning, and then I bought a whole bunch of new books on learning to see what new has been identified. So that took the longest period of time of the writing, the researching. Same thing with wisdom. So I didn't have many books on that subject. There's not that many books. So then I bought a number of books to research what else has been done recently on the subject of wisdom.
Mm-hmm. So I think this is related to the next question asked by Jason. Do you always have a book in the works? And the rest of the question is, at what stage of the current book do you decide the idea of the next one?
Well, so this is where idea generation comes up. When I was doing the book on decision making, I downloaded everything I knew on decision making. And because in the axis of change, we have one whole axis on decision making, it was easy to download a lot because we had been teaching that, training that for years. So I downloaded all of that. And then as I was working on decision and working on how do you do due diligence, how do you set your criteria for your decision making, then the idea came up again and again and again that there's good decision making, there's poor decision making, there's excellent decision making, and then there's wisdom. And I made that continuum. And then I realized I'm writing on how to make excellent decisions that you won't regret. but I'm really not working on wisdom. What is that? And so that, as soon as I finished that book, I knew that wisdom would be the next book.
Mm.
And I try, once again, this is on decision making. This is not on wisdom. I kept those two ideas separate because it's a whole different subject. And when I got into wisdom, I found out that wisdom is not intelligence, whereas decision making is. Decision making goes from poor intelligence to mediocre intelligence to good intelligence to excellent intelligence, and how you're doing intelligence gathering. But wisdom, it's a whole different subject. And so there was a moment where I was thinking I should put this in this book. But then as I looked into it a little bit, I realized, nope, it's a different subject.
Okay. So based on that, I would say that it's a common experience that while you're writing a book, you'll have ideas that you might decide to put in the book, and you might decide to just write a new book about them.
Yeah. The book on the book on metatherapy, as I was finishing that, I was thinking, and Geraldine gave me this idea. She said, you ought to write a whole book on the meta place. And I was shaking my head, no, there's not enough. And it's not important enough. And she brought it up several times. So then I decided I'm going to write the book for me. I'm not going to publish it. I'm just going to, because this is my learning. I'm going to learn, I'm going to detail in precision the meta place. So as I started doing that, and then I got my first draft, she just kept saying, this needs to be published. And I said, no, this is for me. And the more she did that, then the more I realized, okay, this is the next book. I did not intend to do that one. It came out of marriage.
I'd say that's one of the benefits that we have Geraldine's too. Okay. So Michael, we do have a couple of questions about the research part, and I think they are very interesting questions here. So as you said, to do the research, you need to read books, and you said that's the best way to get ideas at the beginning of the sessions today. On average, how many books do you read, and how do you decide which books to read while you're researching for the book?
So I start with my own library to see what I've got on that subject, and then I look inside those books at who's being quoted as experts or reference persons, and how often are they quoted. So if you look for the thought leaders in a field, they'll be the ones who will be quoted most often, and oftentimes are recognized in that field as the thought leaders. So those are the books that I would go after. If you don't know, ask somebody in that field who would know who are the key thought leaders in this field, and then go get those books. And in most fields, it's not going to be that many. It's going to be maybe half a dozen people who are going to be the key thought leaders in that field. And when you read them, when I read them, I read them slowly and deliberately. So I'm not trying to get through the book quickly. I'm reading slowly, trying to fully understand what are they presenting, how do they think about it, what are the models, where do they get their ideas, and so I'm doing a lot of note taking, writing, and notating it in the books. So that's how I choose the books, what to read and where to go. When I see a new book or someone refers a book to me, I usually go to the bibliography to see if they are quoting some of these thought leaders that I know about. And oftentimes I'll find a book, and in the bibliography, that person, the key thinkers are not even quoted. So then, okay, I'm not going to go there because it's probably not very useful. And then when you pick up books and there's no bibliography, I've gotten after 2 or 3 people in the field of neurosemantics in the recent years because they didn't have a bibliography. And if you're going to write a book that's going to be considered professional, you need to have a bibliography. And too many people in the field of NLP, and in the field of NLP, I would say it's 40%. 40% of the books have no bibliography, which is as if the author is saying, I invented all of this by myself. I got this from nobody. I collaborated mentally with nobody, which is such an arrogant perspective. So be sure to have a bibliography. Write down all the books and use a formal stylistic way of detailing those books. I use the APA style, American Psychological Association style. That's how the bibliographies are presented there. So that's how I choose the books about reading. Once I read through those kind of main books, then other books that are kind of secondary books, they're also referring to the key leaders, thought leaders in that field. And I'm going to read those books much quicker. I'm going to scan them or do speed reading on those books. So then I might read 30, 40 books for each book I work on.
So you do a good amount of research. And one of the questions here, and I'd like to add another question to that, do you restrict research to just published books, or do you also read like maybe articles on the internet or other publicities?
Yeah, there's a good number of articles on the internet. And before the internet came along, I went to the library and ordered articles from scholarly books. And the local library, one of their services that they provide is if I see an article, like years ago, I came across the fact that George Miller wrote the article, the research article, the magic number 7 + or - 2. And so I went to the library and said, here's this article. It's in this journal, and I want that article. And so 2 weeks later, went to the library, and they had the 7 or 8 pages of that. So, so there's ways of finding those kinds of how they qualify. Now on the internet, usually you have to pay a subscription price to different scholarly journals that are on the internet, and so that is another way to find good information, more current information.
So the question I'd like to add to this one is, when do you stop the research?
When do I start?
Stop the research. So how do you avoid keeping your research? Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's a judgment call. At some point, you just say, enough. It's good enough to go. And once again, if you're perfectionistic, what if I'm missing one key book? It's just a judgment call. It's good enough to go. Second edition, if I find something between now and the time it's published, it'll be in the second edition. I'll update it later.
Yeah. So that actually leads us to a question by Yosra. What if after you write a book, we change our perception on what we wrote? Do we maybe have like new beliefs, new values? Should we write another book mentioning our new perceptions?
If you're going through the process, the 7 stages, if you're going through those stages thoroughly, your change will occur while you're writing. It'll really occur while you're writing in the process. Bob and I, when we started identifying what we wanted to write about, Bob made this proposal to me. He said, let's take metastates and use metastates as the framework for looking at NLP. So we wrote timelines based on that, metaprograms based on that, and several other books. And then then we decided to write about submodalities. And when we started to write about submodalities, there was no book on submodalities. There was just a little chapter here, little chapter there, and a number of submodality patterns. As we started writing about submodalities and thinking about it, and he was my thinking partner, and every single day I'd write something, send it to him. He would make comments, he would write some more, he'd send it to me. And that was a daily exchange. And as we did that, one day, I said to Bob, I said, I don't think that they're actually submodalities. I think that they're at a meta level. And then we got on the phone with each other and started talking that through. And we had already written 3 or 4 chapters. And I said, we're going to have to rewrite everything because we have started on a false premise, because now we see the premise isn't working, because you can't change it. You really can't change a belief with submodalities. And so that was when the conversation came. I said, Bob, have you ever changed a submodality? And he said, a belief with someone. He said, I just figured I was incompetent and didn't know how to do it. And I said, I figured that the person was incompetent and they didn't know what they were doing when I was leading them through it. And so we said, we got to do some research. I'm going to call 10 NLP trainers I know. You call 10 NLP trainers you know and ask them, have you ever changed a belief with a submodality? And after I called my 10, he called his 10, not a single one admitted that they had ever changed a belief with a submodality. And so I said to Bob, I said, I think we're onto something. And so we decided then, before we keep going too much further, let's create a seminar. Let's create a workshop on submodalities. So we did. That was 1997. We proposed it to the Canadian NLP Association. They accepted our proposal. We went up there. We had like 125 people in the room. We presented this revolutionary new model of submodalities, metamodalities, and we use that as our basis for does anybody here think you can change a submodality, a belief with a submodality? And we got 2 or 3 hands, and so we started questioning them, and then they all changed their minds. And once we had that, and White Woodman was there in our thing, and he came up to me and he said, I hate to admit this, but I think you're right. And that led us to, so we came back from that conference and said, we're going to finish this book and we're going to write Submodalities Going Meta.
It's very, very interesting, and we are having much more questions, and we are having very limited time available. So, Michael, if you'd answer this question as much as we can briefly, and I think this is a very relevant question to many of us. What's your guidance when it comes to quoting you directly or any of your ideas or materials that we write about?
Well, just quote and give reference. I mean, so professionally, that's how, when you quote anybody, and quoting other people in a field is a good way to establish some credibility of whatever you're saying. So I'm always quoting different people and giving reference. So if you notice how I do the referencing, so-and-so said this in this book on this date on this page. And that's the way to do it, just giving those kinds of quotations.
So another question here is, for you, what comes first? Is it the book or the training manual?
Sometimes one, sometimes the other.
Okay.
So I was training mind lines before I wrote the book Mind Lines. So I had the training manual first, and then I thought, okay, I'm going. And same thing with Inside Out Wealth. The reason I wrote Inside Out Wealth as a book, because I've been training it for years and years and years. And Andre Plygen in Moscow. He said, when you come to Moscow to do this Inside Out Wealth workshop, Inside Out Wealth workshop, he said, if we could have the book. And so at that point, I hurried up to write the book so that it could be published and then translated into Russian. So that he could have it.
Interesting.
So sometimes it's one way, sometimes it's the other.
Yeah. Okay. Michael, I think this is something that many people would like to know about. Can you tell us more about the Writing Genius training? We are actually running one next month, and some people attending online here are interested to attend that, whether in person or online. So can you tell us more about what will we learn in that training?
So the training will go through the 7 stages, and each stage will have exercises to do about how to do that, how to frame it, the principles of writing, just like anything else, we'll mind to muscle some of those principles of writing and understand what writing is. We'll work on reading and what reading is, because if you don't understand reading, it's awful hard to write so that people can read and experience. And so we'll go through the strategy of reading and understanding how that people will be reading your writing and anticipating different things that could be troublesome for the reader. So we've got lots of exercises. We'll do the Writing Genius state so that you can be in the state, maintain that state, know how to do the writing, and then step in and out so that you protect that genius state. So that'll be one of the key things we'll do, as well as setting your intentions. We'll go through some of that, some of the exercises. We'll be doing some exercises on freestyle writing to get through and to separate creating and judging, and really creating that. We'll probably do some reframing around perfectionism, because it's a big stopper.
So basically, it's designed to help people actually write and publish their book.
So something good for anybody who's coming to the training is to do some writing now and bring that writing so that you can examine the writing from all the different perspectives that we'll be introducing at the training. And that will help. We won't be doing large blocks of time on writing at the training. It's about how to write rather than the writing. The writing will come afterwards.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Michael, for that. And I think it was very, very useful today. I'd like to take a couple of minutes before we take our group photo. So in a minute, we'll be taking our group photo. But before that, I'd like to share the information of the coming session. I've received several questions about that. So I'd like to share the information of the training, the Writing Genius training that will be taking place in Cairo. So by the end of the training, the purpose or the goal we have for this training is that you do one of 3 things. Either you write and publish a book by yourself. So whatever topic you have in your mind, you can just write that by yourself. Or option 2 is to co-author a book with someone else, maybe 1 or 2 authors. You work together to help each other write the book. And by doing that, you actually become like an international author. If you are based in Egypt and you write a book with someone in Hong Kong or the Philippines, you're already an international author. So that's the option 2. And the third option was actually suggested by Marzuki during our leadership meeting last month, is that a group of us would write a book with Dr. Michael. So each of us would write 1 chapter in that book, and we will decide on the topic together. By doing that, it's much easier and it's much quicker that we produce our first book, because now we only need to write 1 book, 1 chapter. And also it's adding to the credibility because we are a group of people along with Dr. Michael, not just us. So these are the outcomes from the training that we're doing next month. And the training, actually, we're doing it in 2 parts to make sure that you're writing the book. The first part is the Writing Genius training. Dr. Michael will be delivering from the 20th to the 22nd. You can attend that in person in Cairo. Would love if you can come and join us, or online, so we can do the full program online. That's the first part. The second part, because personally I had this experience and challenge. I've read many books, and I did actually attend the training about writing, but I've never done that. So to make sure that we write the book, we will be having a mentoring program right after the training, to make sure that every week you're doing small steps, getting you closer to write and publish your book, to motivate you, to encourage you, to guide you to do that. And that will start like approximately 2 weeks after the end of the training. So from March. These are the two parts of the training that will produce one of the three things I just mentioned. Either you write a book by yourself, co-author it with someone else, or join us to do that. How to register? The investment of this training is the Writing Genius. We have a special offer here on the screen, and the mentoring program. And we also have the package discount. So you can go to this link. And once you do that, let me show you that briefly. Once you do that, you actually have the option to register and pay in installments. So it's easy to go to the order page. You already have the discount included, and you can select the payment plan you want, enter your details, and place your order. So we would love to have you with us in this training. We'd love to have you with us in this program. And again, as I said, this is like our vision, to have more NeuroSemantics books written by the community, not just Dr. Michael. Dr. Michael is producing a lot of books, and I would like to also see other of us producing books. Maybe we can compete with him and have more books in the coming period. So thank you. If you have questions about that, you can email me. I'm the one who sent the announcement for this training, this session, so you can email me. And for now, I want you to have a very beautiful smile while we take the group picture. So please turn on your cameras and have your beautiful smile. Yes, thank you for turning on your cameras. Okay, no time to put on your makeup. You already look beautiful as you are. Just smile. Ready? Okay, so I see most of us. Okay, I will ask you not to move and keep smiling for just 2 seconds. Ready? So the first picture, smile. Keep smiling. We're taking the second picture. Okay, keep smiling. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for that. And thank you, Dr. Michael, for the amazing session. That was very useful. And I hope the rest of us, as it happened for me personally, I'm actually very excited to write my own book and to get started with that. So thank you, everyone. And thank you, Dr. Michael, Geraldine, and everyone who joined us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.